My name is Rex. I was born into duty, raised not as a pet, but as a soldier. From the moment I could walk, I was trained to listen, to obey, to act without hesitation. My body was honed into a weapon, my teeth sharp, my muscles strong, my instincts sharpened like a blade. I knew commands before I knew comfort. To the world, I was just a K9, a machine wrapped in fur, built to protect, to chase, to bite. But deep inside, I was something more. I had memories, feelings, fragments of warmth that no amount of training could erase. I didn't know they would come back to haunt me on that day, the day they ordered me to attack a trembling old man sitting quietly on a park bench. The command was loud, sharp, and clear. "Rex, go get him!" My ears twitched and instinct took over. I lunged forward, my paws digging into the earth, my eyes locked on the frail figure before me. I could feel the tension in my handler's grip on the leash, the collective intake of breath from the crowd, the fear radiating from the parents pulling their children away from the swings nearby. The air was thick with alarm, every sound sharper than usual. The distant bark of another dog, the creak of the swing set, the muttering of officers whose hands hovered over their weapons. Everyone expected me to strike. I was supposed to leap, knock him down, clamp my teeth into whatever he tried to hide. That was my purpose. That was what I had been made for. But just as my muscles coiled for the final leap, something inside me stuttered. My paws dug into the ground, halting me inches from his trembling knees. My chest heaved, but not with rage. It was something else, something I hadn't felt in years. My handler shouted again, his voice edged with frustration. I could hear the murmurs of disbelief from the officers, the gasp from the crowd. I had never hesitated before, not once. Disobedience wasn't in my nature, but my body refused to move forward. Instead, I lowered my head slightly, ears twitching, and sniffed the air. And in that scent, buried beneath the dirt and exhaustion, was a trace of something I knew, something familiar. The old man's hands trembled as he tried to lift his bag. His knees shook like fragile branches in a storm. He wasn't dangerous, not to me, not to anyone. His scent wasn't laced with the metallic tang of weapons or the harsh burn of chemicals. It was layered with something else. Dust, sweat, pain, loneliness. I stared into his eyes, and instead of seeing defiance, I saw recognition. He wasn't looking at me with fear. He was looking at me like he knew me. And then, through the chaos, I heard it. A whisper so weak I thought I might have imagined it. But no, I knew that sound, that voice, my name. Rex. My ears shot up, my tail stiffened. My heart hammered in my chest in a rhythm I hadn't felt since before the uniforms, before the badges, before the endless drills. My handler yanked the leash, confused by my hesitation, barking at me to obey. But I couldn't. The old man's lips trembled again, and he forced out the words, soft but certain. "It's me, Daniel." Daniel. The name was a key, and inside me, locked doors swung open. Memories poured in, flooding me with images I had buried deep beneath layers of training. I saw deserts, endless and hot, the two of us walking side by side under a sky burning with stars. I saw his hands steady on my collar, gentle when they fed me, firm when they guided me through danger. I heard his laugh, rare but warm, breaking through the tension of battle. I remembered nights when the world seemed ready to collapse, and he whispered my name in the dark, reassuring me as much as I reassured him. The explosions, the gunfire, the smoke, I remembered it all. I remembered losing him. The officers didn't understand what they were seeing. To them, it was hesitation, failure, a K9 gone soft. I could hear their radios crackle as they called in backup, their boots shifting in the grass as they closed in. They thought the old man was a threat, but I knew better. I stepped forward, not to attack, but to reach him. Slowly, carefully, I pressed my nose against his shaking fingers. His scent overwhelmed me now, drowning out everything else. It was him. It was Daniel, my handler, my family. Gasps rippled through the crowd. My handler, the one who held my leash, shouted at me in disbelief. But I didn't care. I wasn't listening anymore. Daniel's eyes filled with tears, his voice cracking as he whispered, "I thought they said you didn't make it, that you were gone." My chest rumbled with a whimper, soft and low, a sound I hadn't made since I was a pup. I curled my body against him, ignoring the commands, ignoring the leash. I wasn't just a K9 anymore. I was Rex, and I had found my partner again. The world around us blurred. The officers, the crowd, the raised phones recording every second. It all faded. It was just me and him, two survivors who had been torn apart by war and time and fate. I felt his hand stroke my fur, trembling but steady with love. I remembered everything, the shrapnel he had shielded me from, the nights we had survived together, the smoke where I last heard his voice before the darkness swallowed me. He hadn't forgotten me, and I had never forgotten him. But the humans needed proof. They didn't believe what they saw with their own eyes. Radios buzzed, keys clicked, and within minutes the truth spilled out. The old man was Franklin Daniel Ward, a retired military handler who had been listed as missing in action 6 years ago after a bombing. His unit had been wiped out, they said. He was presumed dead, but he had survived, battered and broken, his memory fractured, his life lost to the cracks of the system. Meanwhile, I had been found, patched up, and reassigned. They had stripped me of the life I once knew and trained me to forget. But I hadn't. I never could. I pressed my head deeper into his lap, my tail wagging faintly as the tension around us dissolved. Some officers lowered their weapons, their faces pale with shock. Others turned away, hands over their mouths, unable to hold back their tears. Parents pulled their children closer, not out of fear, but out of awe. And for the first time in years, I felt whole. I wasn't a weapon. I wasn't just a K9. I was Rex, and I had come home. He held me as if afraid I might vanish again. His hands trembled in my fur, his tears falling onto my coat, and I could feel every heartbeat in his chest. Around us, silence spread. The officers who had moments before shouted commands now stood motionless, caught between disbelief and wonder. One of them whispered into his radio, requesting confirmation. Another rubbed at his eyes, shaking his head like he couldn't trust what he was seeing. The crowd, once tense and fearful, softened. Parents who had pulled their children away now let them watch, their faces wet with tears. Phones were raised, recording the reunion that none of them would ever forget. My handler tugged at the leash once more, confusion written all over his face. He had trained me to be obedient, relentless, unquestioning. But now he watched me collapse at Daniel's side, tail wagging slowly, whining like the pup I once was. His voice cracked when he muttered, "What's wrong with him?" But deep down, I knew he already understood. His grip on the leash loosened. My body leaned harder into Daniel, and for the first time in years, I felt the world tilt back into place. The truth unraveled quickly after that. The background check confirmed it. Daniel, the man everyone thought had died, was alive. He had survived the bombing overseas, but had been left broken, with gaps in his memory. Without ID, without family, he had drifted into a life of shadows, forgotten by the system that once depended on him. And me, his Rex, I had been scooped up, reassigned, retrained, and turned into a tool for a new kind of war. The war on streets, the fight against crime. No one had thought to look for a connection between us, until now. When the news spread through the park, the atmosphere shifted. Weapons were lowered. Radios went silent. The tension dissolved like morning fog under the sun. People clutched their mouths, sobbing openly. A child whispered, "The dog remembers him." And that small voice carried through the stillness, heavier than any order or rule. The K9 officer finally unclipped the leash from my collar. His hand hovered, uncertain, then dropped. "He's not my dog," he said quietly. "Not anymore." I pressed my head harder into Daniel's lap, his arms wrapping around me like he was afraid to let go. He laughed and cried at the same time, whispering, "You didn't forget me after all this time." My tail beat against the grass. I hadn't. Not for a second. I had carried him with me in every patrol, every chase, every restless dream. His voice had been my compass, even when the world told me to erase him. The videos spread faster than any bullet could. Within hours, headlines screamed across the internet, K9 dog reunites with long-lost handler in emotional park scene. People everywhere wept at the story. They didn't see a trained weapon disobeying an order. They saw loyalty that no training, no trauma, no years of separation could erase. They saw love that survived everything. Later that day, higher officials arrived. Supervisors, coordinators, even lawyers with tight lips and heavy folders. They argued quietly about what should happen next. On paper, I was still an active K9. I had a badge, responsibilities, a place in the system. But none of those rules mattered to the people who had witnessed what happened. The commander finally stepped forward, kneeling beside Daniel, his voice calm and steady. "No, sir," he said softly. "We're not taking him away. We're bringing him home." Cheers broke out from the crowd. Children clapped. A woman sobbed into her hands. Daniel cradled my head against his chest, whispering words only I could hear. I wagged my tail as if to say I understood. The leash was gone, and so was the weight of years spent apart. For once, the system bent to compassion. For once, the right thing happened. Weeks passed, and Daniel and I found ourselves in a new home. One quieter, one gentler. A veterans assisted living community welcomed us both. The rooms were small, but they were warm. There was always a meal waiting, a bed to sleep in, and a yard where I could stretch my legs under the morning sun. Daniel had his first medical checkup in years. I was fitted with a new collar, the name Rex engraved in silver beneath the badge I no longer had to wear. We were together again, and that was all that mattered. Life slowed down. Mornings began with quiet walks. Evenings ended with Daniel resting in his chair, his hand on my head, his breath finally steady. Children from the neighborhood visited often, sneaking me treats and giggling when I licked their hands. The staff adored us, calling us inseparable. Other veterans, men who carried their own scars and silences, found courage in Daniel's story, in our bond. They began to share memories they had buried for years, as if seeing us together reminded them that not all things were lost forever. No one called Daniel homeless anymore. No one called me dangerous. We were no longer broken pieces of a system that had forgotten us. We were whole again. Two survivors who had found each other against all odds. Two soldiers, scarred but standing. Two hearts that had never stopped beating in rhythm, even apart. At night, as I curled beside his bed, I sometimes thought back to that day in the park. The shouting, the tension, the command to attack. How close I had come to losing him forever. But fate had other plans. In a world filled with orders, I had chosen love. And love had brought me home. My name is Rex. I am a K9, a soldier, a protector. But above all, I am Daniel's dog. And no matter the years, no matter the battles, no matter the orders, I will never forget him.